Aubrey, how much do you love talking about movies?
I love talking about movies. It's so fun. I know you and I talk about movies a lot, so
All the
this is
time.
gonna be fun today. We have a lot to
Oh,
say.
I know. Guys, we are going to give you two different part two sample answers today. I'm going to do one, and Aubrey's going to do one. And the thing is, both of these questions are about movies because this comes up a lot in speaking part one and part two. And I could see them being indirectly brought up in part three if you're asked about entertainment and media and celebrities. So, today, guys, you're going to get some amazing ideas for talking about movies and, of course, some awesome vocabulary.
Yes, I'm excited for this. Part 2 is tricky because you have to talk for 2 minutes, right? You have
So
heard us
hard.
talk before about telling a story. This is always, especially for something like this, you can only describe a movie for so long. You might
Yeah,
have difficulty sharing. You remember the actors' names maybe, or you don't want to give the whole plot, who knows? But if you can tell a story about when you watched it and give some details, you're going to fill
totally.
2 minutes in no time.
Totally, totally. So, you're going to get a lot of great ideas for how to fill out part two in an interesting way, providing lots of context. So, the 2 minutes seems easy breezy. So, both of these part two questions, like I said, are about movies, but they are slightly different. So, the one that I am going to talk about is talk about a movie that you enjoyed watching in the cinema. All right. So Aubrey's gonna time me. She's gonna be the examiner. Aubrey, are you ready?
Yes, let me get my timer here and go.
So I love that I got this question because I actually just joined Movie Club for Cinemark. There's this, and I will get to the movie, I promise, but there's this theater near where I live, and they have reclining seats, and they're like these enormous, spacious leather seats, and they recline, and you slide back with your feet up. And anyway, I joined Movie Club because I get a free ticket every month and I save money on popcorn. Anyway, that was a long side tangent. Sorry about that. Let's get to the movie. The movie that came to mind was the most recent we saw, which was Gladiator 2. My son and I have been seeing previews for this movie for months because again, we go to the movies a lot. And I was really excited about this movie to come out because this means that I got to watch the first Gladiator with my son. And I hadn't seen that since I was a teenager, I think, like since it came out. And what a classic. I was honestly kind of afraid that it would be a bit slow for James because it's a movie from the 90s. It's not all like action packed pow 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 like all the movies today. But he loved it. And of course that famous scene, are you not entertained? Like being able to watch that with James and now he sees it all over pop culture because it is referenced. So anyway, a couple weeks ago when the movie came out, I was super excited. And so I told James that I would take him and his friend August to the theater. And it was really funny. On the way to the theater, I was like, hey, August, like, what was the last movie you saw, in the theater? He's like, the last time I went with you guys. And he said, I think the only time I get to go to the movies is when you guys take me. I'm like, well, fantastic. I'm glad we can be your movie friends. So, anyway, we go to the theater and we watch Gladiator 2. It was incredible. I was so stoked to actually see Denzel Washington in a new movie. He used to be in everything in the 90s. And my son and I just watched The Manchurian Candidate, the remake that Denzel was in a few months ago. We watched that. And you forget how incredibly talented this man is because you don't get to see him act anymore. So I was,
Thank you. Ooh, I was so
oh,
interested in your answer that I forgot, and you went like 20 minutes over. I apologize.
20
So
minutes?
20
I was
minutes, 20
talking for
seconds.
22 minutes just
Imagine,
now.
imagine
I
20 minutes.
probably could.
20 seconds. So that probably felt long to you guys. That was like 2 minutes and 23 seconds because I was very interested. This is the best case scenario. If the examiner is so
I
interested
know,
in your
right?
answer, they forgot to pay attention to the timer.
It
So
did
that
not
goes,
feel like 2 minutes. There was
okay.
so much else I wanted to say about the movie.
And that's such a good point that when you're telling a story and you're sharing details from your actual life, the time will fly by. You'll have so many interesting things to say. You could fill 3 minutes, 4 minutes, right?
Totally.
So I'm excited to dive into all of the things you did really well that made this high scoring. I loved how you started it to say, I love that I got this question and share why, right? If it's a good question you're excited about answering, definitely say that this is such a
Show
better
it.
start.
Yes.
Yes, then like, I am going to talk about Gladiator. No.
I know. Today, I would like to describe the cinematic motion picture Gladiator 2. Like, that would be so terrible and boring and awkward and weird.
No, exactly, right? Start like this. Share how you feel about the question is a great way to start your answer. And then I loved there's one grammar form, one chunk here that you used that will be so helpful for everyone out there preparing for part 2 that I want to share. Jessica said, "I was honestly kind of afraid that it would be boring."
Mm,
This is so smart to add this extra detail of put yourself in the past and what did you think would be
it's
different or
complicated.
what were you worried about, to use that interesting grammar form of I was afraid that it would be blank. You could say this about anything you're telling a story about.
Totally. You could even use it in part 1 and part 3,
Yeah.
right? To describe, like, any previous context to an experience you're describing, right? And it's such a high level grammar structure.
Yes, absolutely. And then I also want to point out Jessica used some interesting ways to come back to the topic because yes, you can talk about whatever anything you want, you can go off tangents, but it's smart to name it, right? A couple things. You were like, I promise I will get to, describing the actual movie. And then you said, so anyway, side tangent. Sorry about that. And you came back. This is great native natural vocabulary that you're using to recognize that you are going on tangents. You don't have to. You can just go on a tangent and
Yeah.
then just come back. But you can also add this really interesting vocabulary to, because we do that, right? We talk about it, we point it out when we go on a tangent.
And being able to narrate the connections between your
Yes.
ideas, that is band 8, band 9 fluency and coherence skills right there, right? So, speaking is not linear. Speaking is not perfectly organized. It can't be. It's spontaneous. It's unplanned. But you do need the phrases that glue these ideas together. Okay, all right, Aubrey. So Aubrey's question is slightly different. Um, Aubrey, I would like you to describe a movie that you like. Can you start speaking now, please?
My favorite film of all time is a film called About Time. It is so heartwarming. I watch it every year, sometimes multiple times a year. I recommend it to everyone I know, and surprisingly, a lot of people haven't heard about it. It was not exactly a blockbuster, but the script is so amazing, really funny, a lot of clever dialogue, but also just so touching. The overall theme of the movie is that we should make every moment count. And I love that, but it is shown in such a clever way. So in the film, there is a man and his son that both can time travel. They can go back in time and change things. And it's a really interesting thought um, process that they go through to determine should they change things. So you see what's affected, and I don't want to, no spoilers here because you should absolutely see the movie, but often they decide I shouldn't have changed that. Something went wrong. Something, would have been better if I left it the way it was. But sometimes they realize it's worth whatever consequences might happen for them to make this change, to affect someone's life in a positive way. So the best part about the film at the end, he decides instead of trying to change anything, I'm going to live each day with all of the stresses and frustrations that come with the average, boring, dull, mundane day. And then I'm going to live it a second time. And knowing what's going to happen, I can just appreciate every moment. And appreciate the people in my life and take advantage of every conversation and really live in the moment instead of sort of being
Thank
nervous
you.
about what happens
Thank
next.
you.
Way to watch the
Awesome.
time better than I did.
Well, hey, you know, it's my 14 years of examiner experience is cemented in my brain. What can I say? Okay. That was amazing. So, I love that listeners, you guys are getting 2 different approaches to describing the movie, right? Different strategies here. Now, mine, I barely even touched on the plot of Gladiator 2, to be honest, because it made me think of so much interesting context and experience that I wanted to share around that movie. Um, I still fulfilled the requirements of the task, right? But I think that way is it can be more difficult, perhaps, right? Trying to glue all these side tangents
Mm,
together. So I love that, Aubrey, you were able to more stick to what the plot was and to use the movie itself as a way to organize your answer, right? And I think, guys, that is the better strategy to go with, because it's easier to take notes on, right? And it's easier
mm,
to divert from while you're speaking and come back to. And I also loved, guys, this is a great thing to use if maybe you don't remember some of the plot or you're like, I can't describe like everything that happens in this movie. Something that Aubrey did said was so great. You're like, no spoilers here because you should totally watch the movie. So you guys could just say that if you don't want to say the whole plot. You know what I mean? Like that was so good. And I want to just draw attention to one more great sort of linguistic device that students might doubt. So Aubrey, you said average, boring, dull, mundane day. So some students might look at that and think, you know, but you're just giving synonyms here. That's not okay. That's redundant. This is showing vocabulary. This is something that I do all the time because I love words, right? Being able to string together interesting adjectives that are synonyms, but it emphasizes what you wanted to say, right? You want to highlight the fact that days, just boring days. It's just drudgery, right? And so using all of these amazing adjectives together is demonstrates such great lexical ability. So average, boring, dull, mundane day. I had to write that phrase down because it was so good.
That's such a good point. We do this in natural speech, right? To emphasize that we
Yes.
will, and sometimes they'll sort of build, like mundane's the worst of all of those. You're sort of building
Right?
like,
Yeah,
oh,
that's
average
true.
and dull. It didn't give enough of what I want to say. I have to add these more extreme to be
Exactly.
clear about how I feel, right?
Yeah, it escalates, right?
Yes, exactly. And I had told Jessica I was going to talk about Wicked
I know,
because
I was surprised. I was
you're
like, "Why did
surprised,
you
I bet.
talk about this?"
Because I loved that film and I felt like I had a ton to say, but my answer would have been more similar to Jessica's. So then I thought, what's a film that I've
Ah,
seen so many times that I could really more
nice.
describe the plot and what I love about it? So I switched last minute to talk about one of my favorite films. This
Wow.
is it's something you want to think about. You want to make sure you can fill the 2 minutes. So maybe you don't want to say the most recent, even if the question is, what's the most recent movie you saw? The examiner doesn't know. I could
Yeah,
have watched About Time yesterday, right? You
exactly.
want to talk about a film that you would have a lot to say about, a lot of detail, maybe that you feel that you're passionate about, you'll have more to say. And it's easier to have interesting intonation when you care more about it.
Totally, totally. Yeah, if I were given the most recent film and I couldn't think of a movie I saw recently I wanted to talk about, I would talk about The Shining because I have seen that like at least 20 times. And actually, James and I decided that The Shining is a Christmas movie because it has snow in it. And so that is now one of our traditional Christmas movies we watch
I love
every
that.
year.
Gotta watch it at Christmas. That's so
And
funny.
I didn't even suggest it. I was like, "James, like, let's just think of any movies with snow. They can be Christmas movies. What do you wanna watch?" And he's like, The Shining. I was like, "We just watched that a couple months ago, but okay."
I love that so much. I love all of the strategies you and vocabulary that you guys are getting today. You definitely want to practice answering questions like this. You might think, oh, I could describe my favorite movie. I don't need to practice that one. But you might be
Uh-uh.
surprised that
Yeah,
on test day, you get there and you're like, if I haven't ever spoken about this out loud, it might still be
exactly.
difficult to access active vocabulary about it, right? So definitely practice talking about favorite movies and songs and TV shows. Even if you feel like, I would have tons to say about this, still practice these answers.
Yeah, 100%, guys. Especially if this is something that, if it's a movie in your first language and you've only talked about it in your first language,
Right.
you need to
Yes.
practice in English, right, guys? All right. So, the takeaway today is that we love movies. We hope you do too. It's a fantastic way to, uh, prepare for IELTS watching movies. But, guys, here's just some homework as a takeaway. The next time you watch any movie or TV show, after you finish watching it, try to describe what you just watched in English for 2 minutes, right? If you add that to just your like weekly routine, that is such great IELTS practice. All right, guys, if you have an IELTS question, send it to us and we'll mention you in a future episode. Support at allearsenglish.com.
Awesome. We will see you guys next week. Thanks, Jessica.
Thanks, Aubrey. Bye.
Bye.